Say it. Out loud. Say it.
Vampire.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody. My name is Kevin.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Real Review, the series where we review and discuss all your favorite movies. Ladies and gentlemen, it's February, so you know what that means. It's the real season of love. On the Real Season of Love, we take a look at all your favorite romance kind of movies, and you know what? Why not? We're ready to sink our teeth into one of the most infamous vampire love stories ever told, the Twilight series, starting off with Twilight. When Bella Swan moves to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, she falls in love with Edward Cullen, a mysterious classmate who reveals himself to be a 108-year-old vampire. Oh boy, guys, it's been a while. I feel like we've been on a little bit of a break, but I'm glad we're back now, you know, jumping into the reviews and everything like that. And to my dismay, we're jumping back into maybe one of the most infamous series, as I kind of said earlier, the Twilight series. 2008 was an interesting year that sparked the love of a million young girls flocking towards pale-faced vampire boys and girls with low self-esteem loving that same character. And then it sparked a whole rebellion in movies, I think, for a little bit. I know Adam was definitely a big Twilight fan, I'm sure, during that time period. Absolutely. Julie definitely was. She probably had a cardboard cutout, an Edward cardboard cutout, right? Was that the thing?
I did.
Oh, boy.
I did.
Oh, boy. But like I said, Twilight is, regardless of how you feel about Twilight and its many movies, which we're going to be covering all of them, so that's something for us. So please make sure you like and subscribe, because this is a bit painful. Regardless how you feel, it has a legacy, right? I think it did affect a certain kind of genre. The young adult genre kind of became front and forward at the time. Hunger Games kind of came about after that, which we talked about in our couple of reviews a way back. We talked about Hunger Games, but Twilight was kind of like the start of the young adult revolution, right? I think in the movie cinema, around the same time we had Harry Potter and all those other kind of series. But Twilight is an interesting piece of work. In my opinion, I don't know if this is going to be like a big revelation to anyone. Twilight really doesn't work as a movie at all for what it's trying to do. It fails as a horror movie. It fails as a fantasy. It fails as a romance, which I think ironically should be the most important part. But where does it fall? Because I don't know. For me personally, I don't know if it falls into that category of it's so bad it's good. But I don't think it does. I think it just misses the mark and kind of ends up being bad. But not to say that it's a completely terrible experiment. I think there is a discussion to be warranted, and we'll go into it. But before we jump into our deep discussion here, I want to get some of your guys' opinions. Adam, talk to me. It's probably been a while, but what's your thoughts on the first Twilight film that we had?
I actually only recently watched these last year.
Okay, so you're relatively new. That's fair. Okay.
I think these are those they fall into that category they're a car crash. I can't look away type thing. Right. It's I gotta know what happens because I never read the books because I have no interest in it. But I don't know. I wanted to know what happens. So it was, but it was sure interesting.
It was sure interesting. That's probably the best we're gonna get, right?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So sure interesting. We'll go deeper into that, of course. Julie, talk to me. What do you think? Early thoughts.
So as a teenager, I was all aboard the Twilight train. I read all the books, watched all the movies. I do believe that they fall into the category of it's so bad it's good. Okay. Because I guess similar to the car crash theory, you can't look away. You are so enthralled with what's happening and it's not good, but you're going to continue to watch it. And I would definitely go back and watch these movies again. This is definitely, I don't know what rewatch this is for me. It's been a long time. But yeah, this is something I'll watch again down the line.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. This is probably my, I want to say second or third time maybe seeing it somehow in my existence. I did actually read the books, believe it or not. A young Kevin did read the books for whatever reason. It was a different time. What am I going to say? I wanted to be part of pop culture at the time, so I read them. But I'm not really comparing the two because I think the books are pretty much on the same level as the movies. We'll get that out of the way first.
Yes.
I don't think there really is much difference. And if there is, honestly, I don't remember and I really don't care because we're focused on the movies right now. But as far as the movies, I don't know. Julie, you said you think it's so bad it's good. I tend to disagree a little bit with that because this movie has one thing going for it, right? It's trying to be a Romeo and Juliet style of kind of movie. It's like a hybrid of that with supernatural elements, right? Essentially.
She falls asleep on her bed with a copy of Romeo and Juliet in her hand. Oh, that's the second one, but still.
Still, it happens, and that's a thing that kind of happens with these movies. It's weird because this movie it's such a curse to itself with the way it's adapted. I feel like it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It wants to be this hybrid of, again, like the Romeo and Juliet with the supernatural kind of sub elements, but unfortunately, because there's these two elements, I feel like both of them kind of fail. Would you guys agree with that? Like the vampires, well, everything they do with vampires is just uncool. And I feel like that's one of the things, the big thing going against this, because you have other movies, and something I would compare this to is The Lost Boys, right? The Lost Boys is a fantastic kind of vampire movie that integrates things. I know that takes elements, and there's similar things here. The Lost Boys, at least the vampires in that are cool, right? Like you understand like the sexual attraction and all this, but in this, I don't see where it is.
I have one better for you because this was in the era of Twilight. And I was more this team once it came out, Vampire Diaries. Vampire Diaries did vampires better than Twilight. They had more sex appeal. They were more dangerous and cool and mysterious. And the stories itself, it had some, and you mentioned like horror elements too. Like, of course it was TV, but the Vampire Diaries, I think, is more successful in the teenage vampire romance category of media that we got at that time.
Right. And again, I just think it feels like this movie's biting off more than it can chew. No pun intended here. The vampire, we don't get enough of the vampires. Adam, would you agree with that? Because like, there's things about the vampires I think that are incredibly interesting, but they never really give you any kind of details about like immortality or anything like that. We're just kind of like, hey, I'm a vampire. That's cool.
Yeah, I absolutely got the feeling that it always feels like the vampirism takes a back seat to pretty much the love story at that point.
Right, and then they have like super speed, and it's like
thrown in there, yeah.
Like super speed, and like it's just like, and then like the part with the venom being like poisonous when they bite somebody, like that becomes like a crucial thing towards the end of the movie. Was that ever like said in the movie? I don't.
They mentioned it when when Edward talks about his transformation. And another element that I feel like is so quickly brushed upon is, at least for the Cullens, they all have like special powers, additional powers that they got when they returned. Why? But they also don't even go into everybody's special power, which again, like, how are you going to do that eloquently? But then they like randomly, well, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm jumping into the second movie, but that's a cool thing that they could have delved more into in this movie.
Yeah. So it sucks because I feel like if it took the time to like delve deeper into some of the vampire lore and stuff, I think this movie would have been more interesting. And maybe that's something we'll see a little bit down the line that they kind of try to fix at some point. But in this early movie, it's incredibly boring. Most of this movie too. I hate to tell you, it's incredibly slow. Adam, was it a snail's pace for you for most of the film too? Because I don't know, I found myself kind of waning here and there just a little bit.
Yeah, this is another one of those films where it's like I remembered what happened, and then going back for the second watch, it was like, I paused real quick,
yeah,
and I'd be like, "Crap, I'm only like a third in," and then I start going through like, "Oh crap, we got to go here, we still got to do this, we got to do this."
And why do you think it is so slow? Like, what would you think contributes maybe to some of its elements that makes it kind of like a slow film?
Personally,
yeah.
I have a problem with remembering all of the movies and like separately.
Right.
They all kind of blend for me.
Which is a problem for sure. Right.
So like Eclipse, I don't even remember that Eclipse happened most of the time.
I said that too, actually, when we get to that one. I don't know.
Like, 'cause I was like, oh, we got to rewatch, the 4 movies. And they're like, crap, wait, there's 5.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, I think personally, that's what my biggest issue is, especially going back for the second watch. But I mean, maybe because of the fact that the vampire stuff, which is the most interesting part for me, it does take that backseat. That's probably why it is that sluggish crawl.
And I agree with Julie here because she said there's an element of danger that's missing throughout this movie. Because when you're with like a vampire, it's supposed to feel dangerous. Or there's supposed to be this like eerie shroud of like, oh, I don't. Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Because in the movie we have him going, "I'm a monster, Bella. I'm a monster. You won't like me," you know.
As he sparkles in the sunlight.
Sparkles in the sunlight. But the problem is, like, we don't see a dangerous side to him ever. And when there is something kind of dangerous revealed about the vampire world, it's more like it just so happenstance, a coincidence that these bad guys started like roaming around. And that's part of the plot. The plot of this movie is an absolute mess. And I think part of that is also the way it's adapted. And again, I don't remember from the book, and not that it matters much, but a lot of this movie feels like we're just jumping from plot point to plot point in this movie without kind of any kind of connective tissue. It's like the movie opens up, Bella's going to a new school. She sees a guy she likes, almost gets killed by a car. Jump to the next plot point. Oh, he's back at school suddenly. Oh, he likes her now. Oh, jump to the next point. He's introducing to the family. Whoa, what happened? We're together now? Like, whoa, slow down. I'm a vampire. Whoa, let's jump to the next plot point. We're playing baseball outside. Whoa, jump to the next plot point. There's a bunch of guys trying to kill Bella out of nowhere. Literally after like 2 seconds, like, your blood smells good. I'm going to go kill you. What the hell is this movie's connective tissue? Nothing feels organic in this movie. It feels so incredibly forced and tacked on. And Julie, do you think that's because of the writing? Just like, it feels like, I've seen some people discuss this early on too. It feels like kind of like the early Harry Potter movies to some extent. Not that they're bad, because they're not bad. Those are actually good movies, but they jump from plot point to plot point. But where Harry Potter does it well is there's actually a connective tissue between each of the plot points to get to the conclusion of the film. There is none. It's literally just, oh, you like that scene in the book? Here it is. Oh, you like that scene in the book? Oh, here it is. And I don't know. I think it's just a bad adaptation and writing standpoint that it comes from.
It's so hard. I really don't want to say too much about the books because it's been so long. I really can't.
Yeah, which is
adjust.
We're adapting the movie, so
right. However, the books aren't anything to write home about either. So I think it is a pretty close adaptation. Obviously, there's going to be stuff that's missing. I think it all really kind of boils down to Stephenie Meyer's writing, because again, if you're looking at the core story that we're presented with in the movie, it is a mess. But a big part of it for me is some of the characters I find to be unspectacular.
All of them.
All of them, but then one in particular, and this is, a big pop. Well, it's beating a dead horse, but whatever. And then lack of chemistry.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Adam? Do you agree with Julie about the lack of chemistry between the leads? Because I've seen some people actually absolutely love Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart's chemistry. I mean, they're huge actors, and they're a huge actor and actress now, obviously. But at this time, do you think they were right? Do you think they had a good chemistry that was believable? Because that's your selling point, right, for this movie? That's what it's going to be, ultimately?
I don't know. I guess in terms of actors, I was probably more of a Taylor Lautner fan, because I feel like they had more of chemistry than her and Bella.
The next one.
Her and Edward. Yeah, I know.
Well, I know, but they do have some interaction.
There's a little flirting in this. There's a little flirting.
Yeah, I know.
Obvious, but there's a little
I agree with you, Adam, on that actually. And I was like,
so dry.
Yeah.
Book-wise, I was Team Edward.
Yeah.
And then movies, I started to sway more Team Jacob.
Yeah.
So,
I have more of a problem with Bella, though, than Edward.
So part of the problem is this, I think. This movie does one thing I really, really hate, and if you've been following this channel for a little bit, you probably know what I don't like, is there's a voiceover, and there's an optional voiceover, I'll call it, because sometimes Kristen Stewart feels the need to narrate in the movie, and then sometimes she absolutely doesn't. And because it's not consistent either way, I never feel like we truly see what Bella's thinking in the movie. And I think that hurts the translation of this material. So for us to really understand why she's so really attracted to Edward in this movie, we're missing something. Like, the book probably does a decent job at that, I would assume. I don't know if I remember. I think it is from her perspective, and she's kind of telling and narrating like what she feels, what she's thinking. The movie, unfortunately, didn't do the option of what we need is translate that to film. So when Bella's looking at Edward, instead of making like a bitten lip or whatever she does halfway all the time throughout the whole movie, it's just incredibly awkward. Like, that doesn't translate to me. That doesn't translate to an actual like romance to me to make it feel tangible, right? I don't think there's nothing heartfelt about their relationship, which it really hurts. What do you think about that, Julie? You think that's accurate?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess again, there is the lack of pacing. Chemistry, but then also the breakneck pace that the relationship moves. You don't get that, like, okay, here's the beginning where they're like kind of interested in each other. It's for Bella watching the movie, it seems more like the mystery of trying to find out what Edward is. And then she also happens to fall in love with him. And once they're in, like, I love you. I can't live without you.
It feels
Turn
out of
me into a
nowhere.
vampire instantly, And again, it does go back to the books that way. I think they're very similar in that respect. But I don't think that, and again, it could be a multitude of things with direction and whatever, but I don't think Kristen Stewart does a great job of portraying her love and affection for Edward, and vice versa as well.
Vice versa. I don't think Robert Pattinson really contributes
No.
anything to the great actor that he is now. A lot of people really love Robert, and I happen to be one of them. I think he's a fantastic actor. I think Kristen Stewart's a fantastic actress as well. But early Robert Pattinson's pretty cringe, and a lot of it has to do, I think, just with the dialogue that he's given. It's so corny and over the top. My soul is yours. There's something stupid he says in the movie, like something like, I wouldn't live without you. Like, I would know. I forget what it is. There's a lot of that, though. Just keep in mind, there's a lot of that. It's just all like those kind of things. Like, I'll never live without you, even if I could live forever, or something like that. It's like these stupid, like, just comments that are just like really bad. And unfortunately, it doesn't bolster the characters at all. And I think that really hurts the movie, unfortunately. Let's talk about things we do like about Twilight, because there are some things I think this movie does well. I do like the soundtrack, actually, in this movie. I think the score and the soundtrack itself are actually really well done. What did you think of that, Adam? Because I thought there were a lot of, like, some of the moments that really shouldn't have worked or had no business working kind of spark up a little bit just with some of the score, I think, in this film, because I do think it does stand out a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, between that and a lot of the set pieces, I think a lot of it, it made that ambiance, work for the film, at least that they were going
for. The whole town of Forks itself is
the
just...
small town setting, I think, works really well. The forest setting is iconic, for good, better or worse. A lot of that forest is used in a lot of movies, I think. And, Twilight kind of did it. They kind of made it more popular, and I think it does have a nice setting about it. It's weird because this movie does feel very low budget, and I guess it is to some extent. It's definitely made with like zero budget, and I wonder, do you think a higher budget would have helped this movie at times? Because I feel like maybe something could have helped, because some of the powers just like incredibly cheesy. Like when they're running, it just looks so corny, and just like I feel like there's like a famous like meme online where he's like holding Kristen Stewart on his back, Robert Pattinson, they're on like strings and they're like bouncing through the forest or whatever like that. It's incredibly funny and incredibly cheesy. But I wonder if a higher budget would have helped. Because at the end of the movie, I will say, the action scene, I thought was actually pretty well done, I will say. And that was probably the most interesting this movie ever got. What do you think of that, Adam? The whole like climax of this movie where they're actually fighting vampires and there felt like there were stakes. Again, to me, that felt like the most interesting this movie ever was.
Yeah, like we said earlier, I just wish there was more of a setup for that scene. But once we got there, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Like,
between
how do you
that,
kill a vampire and like all these kind of crazy things, like, oh, we have to rip his head off and like burn the body and like, whoa,
right?
Okay, here we go.
That's where the movie really picked up and actually, held my interest. Be like, oh, okay, now we're getting to what I want to know about more.
Right, and again, I think it does match the book to some extent, so however you feel about that is what it is, but this is a time you could have changed that, because I think that lingering threat needed to somehow be in the movie. What do you think of that, Julie? Do you think that would have maybe helped the plot? Again, I know we're going for adaptation here, but sometimes adaptation's not the best route to some extent.
Yeah, it's hard because I guess if we're talking about like the antagonistic group, you get glimpses of them early on in the movie where they're attacking hikers and other people. And again, I can't remember the book correlation to it or not. They're purposefully kind of, you don't get a full look at them because they want you to suspect that it is the Cullens doing it until you find out otherwise.
You never really feel that way, though. That's the only problem, I feel like. Even if
exactly.
Even if I didn't see this movie or read the books or anything, like, I never would have thought it was them. I'm like, that's not them.
I know. And you could tell they try, because Bella makes a comment after Edward disappears for a few days and then his eyes change color. So you're like, oh, he must have fed. And we know that someone just died recently. So them being a bigger threat, I think, would have been more impactful. But I do think like the baseball scene's iconic in this movie. As silly as it is so iconic.
And you know what? And I'm going to say this to bounce off that just real quick. That's when I think Twilight's at its best. I think when
Yes.
it's having a good time with itself,
Yes.
and it's not like sticking too closely to this like dark, damp like storytelling. This dark. It's actually when it's having fun. That's kind of when I started to have a little bit of fun with the movie.
Right. And you have the two groups of vampires meet, which that part, they're intimidating, but it's also silly because they're literally like gliding across the field.
Yeah, I'm like, are
So
they
me and
walking
Kevin
or
just
gliding?
started cracking up. But that is like a moment where you're like, oh, okay. It becomes real for Bella, and it becomes real, I guess, for the audience that like she was lucky enough to find this vegetarian group of vampires, but this is the real deal here, and they're not going to mess around when it comes to killing for blood. So that's, again, you see the stakes going up at that moment.
It's unfortunate because I think, again, this marriage of two different stories, the Romeo and Juliet and the supernatural aspects of it, one, they need some kind of conflict in them, besides, because again, there's not really a Romeo and Juliet conflict. I mean, there kind of is, like, it never seems like that huge of an issue though in the movie. Edward's like, oh, I fell in love with Bella, she's a human. The family's like, okay, sure. We like you. That's
great. We love you.
So what's the conflict there, right? There's absolutely no conflict because the family's not like, a human, how dare you? You're a vampire, blah, 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 blah. Then that really doesn't happen. So when you're watching this movie, it's really just like, oh, is the girl gonna like the guy, or is he ever gonna ask her? Like, that's like the conflict of the movie until suddenly like 3/4 of the way, and it's like, we want to kill you. We're a bunch of murderous vampires. We're gonna murder you. And then Bella, we gotta get out of here.
They're just like, here's a salad.
Yeah. Right, here's a salad.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky. I guess they have the one family member, Rosalie, who does not like Bella.
But that's not even like, it
palatable.
doesn't even matter though, because it's like,
I know it doesn't matter because they're still gonna do whatever anyways.
Yeah, it's a lot of this movie too. It's like, and I don't want to say it's terrible because I don't think this movie necessarily is terrible. A lot of it's just kind of passable. Is that a good word for it? It's fun.
Oh yeah.
Like some people, like a lot of the actors are just fine in the movie, and it has a lot of like decentish actors in this movie too.
I would be remiss to say a shining light in this movie is Charlie Swan, Billy Burke. He is such a golden treasure. Poor Charlie.
Yeah, and it's funny.
He's doing the best he can.
But see, that's part of like the issues too, because he's literally just a background character in this movie. Like when she's like yelling at her dad, like, I have to run away and get away from you, and I must say what mom said to you to hurt you, so I don't ever have to come back. Been nice to add some like context to that earlier, or some kind of like relationship between the two to actually make me care about that.
And he's not even a vampire.
No,
it's like
I know it's
uninteresting. Just regular human.
Yeah, I'm a cop. I'm a small town cop. I can't. It's like
he's the sheriff. God damn it.
Oh, he's the sheriff. Excuse me. Again, this movie, it just falls flat on a lot of things, and it sucks because I think there is something potentially here. The vampire lore, maybe if it was just explored a little bit more, might have been super interesting. Because, I mean, I know realistically at the time when this movie came out, the young girls are flocking towards, like, the next big thing, right? And I guess that's the appeal. It's Edward and Bella's relationship. It's every young goth shy girl's dream to have, like, this pale-faced guy come up to you and go, I love you and you have my soul forever. I guess that's the appeal of this movie, ultimately. And, it hit an audience, and, I mean, it worked, right? There's a lot of movies after this, and we're going to be talking about all of them, but with all that being said, guys, I think we've kind of run out of stuff to say, and I don't want to beat a dead horse with a stick here. Let's go to our final scores. I'm going to give Twilight a 4 out of 10. It's not terrible. I mean, I know a 4 out of 10 is not great, but I do find some things a little bit interesting with this movie. I give it credit. I think the score is really good. That's probably like the most standout thing about this movie. And I always think of the songs when they pop up. Whenever I hear them, I'm like, oh, that's the song from Twilight. That's the baseball scene song when that pops up. Again, when it's having fun, I think it's a little bit relatively interesting. I'd be remiss if I said that I didn't laugh ironically at some of the scenes when they happened, especially the earlier scenes, like when Edward's like smelling Bella and he's like he's like throwing up, like I'm like, what the hell is this movie? Like if you had no context for what's going on, it's actually absolutely hilarious at times, but then it's really boring. Nothing really comes out of any of it. There's really no conflict throughout the whole movie till the last 3/4, and then it's like serviceable, and like I kind of said earlier, the movie's passable. And again, I don't know if 4 out of 10 is like the best score ever, but to me, that's kind of where it lands. I could take it or leave it. If it pops on, I'd like, out of morbid curiosity, I'd probably look its way and just see what's going on. But otherwise, it's not really for me. It's not meant for me either. So keep that in mind, with my score here. But Adam, how about you? What do you think on this one?
I don't know if I'm gonna go as low as a 4 because I still it's that car crash is so interesting to me. I think I'm gonna give Twilight a 5.8 out of 10.
Well, you really shouldn't have said that. You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
It's entertaining enough to, hold my interest, I think. And I think it's because I watched it both times with two different people that really like the series.
Right.
So maybe that's just different context. So at least it's not that painful for me.
Right. And I don't know if it's painful. I guess it's more just, again, it's just fine for me.
It exists. That's why I think I can't quite give it a 6, but I think a 5.8 is justifiable.
All right, I can understand that. Julie, how about you? You're the last one. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to be giving Twilight a 6 out of 10.
You're beautiful.
Beautiful. This is the skin of a killer, Bella.
I'm team it's so bad it's good. You watch it, it's not good, but you can't stop watching it kind of thing. And I will say, I feel like it does get better. So we'll see. It's been a long time. But there's glimmers in here of, an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, Twilight, it's just a very interesting case study of how popular this series became off of this movie. Sometimes you watch a movie and you're just like, this is terrible, and like, how does it exist? And maybe there's other things, there's other factors, obviously, with Twilight. There was a book series, there was a lot of hype built into this. There was a whole engine behind this movie when it came out that made it popular. And they struck while the iron was hot. It kept going, and it went for a while. And we'll be covering everything, but I want to know in the comments below what you guys think. What do you think of Twilight? So bad it's good? Is it just good, or is it just bad? I'm really curious, and I want to be honest. I felt like we had a good mix of everybody kind of in this review, kind of having like a different opinion. Again, I don't want to say it's absolutely terrible. Again, I know my score is low, and I know the Twilight fans are going to be like, it's a great movie. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Like, it's how I feel. And again, I admit it's not made for me, but try to see it from my perspective. That's from a score from someone who's trying to analyze the movie a little bit deeper than maybe I should be, but that's kind of how I feel. But again, I want to know what you guys think. Does it get better from here? Does it get worse? We got a lot of movies to cover in this series, and the real season of love is just beginning. But again, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel if you like everything we're saying. Follow us on all our social medias and on all podcasting platforms. My name's Kevin. That's Adam and Julie. We are the Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll see you guys in the next one.